October 27, 2025. Midhurst Gardens, Uxbridge, 5:03 p.m. You're watching a quiet residential street in West London transform into a crime scene in real time. Neighbors stand in doorways, phones raised, filming something they don't yet understand. 3 people have been attacked. 1 won't survive. The other 2 will carry scars visible and invisible for the rest of their lives. The attacker is 22 years old. He's standing near a garden wall when police arrive, covered in evidence. He doesn't run, doesn't resist. Just stands there with an expression that witnesses will later describe as blank, like he's watching this happen to someone else. His name is Safi Dawood. He arrived in Britain 5 years ago hidden in a lorry. The government granted him asylum in 2022. Now he's about to become the center of a case that will ignite social media speculation, political arguments, and uncomfortable questions about systems that are supposed to protect people. But first, someone has to figure out what actually happened on this ordinary Monday evening in Uxbridge. Afghanistan in 2019 to 2020 was a nation approaching complete transformation. The American withdrawal was underway. The Taliban was consolidating power in rural areas while the Kabul government maintained control of major cities. But everyone could see the direction events were moving. For people with certain backgrounds, those who worked with Western forces, government officials, educated professionals, the calculation was simple: remain and face persecution, or leave, while exit routes still existed. Dawood was born March 13, 2003. This makes him a child during the Taliban's initial fall in late 2001. He grew up during the American occupation, the period of relative stability, education expansion, and Western presence. By 2019, he was 16 years old, a teenager who'd never known Taliban governance, who'd attended school in a system that values education, who'd lived in a society where young people had possibilities beyond rigid theocratic control. The prospect of Taliban return meant those possibilities disappeared. No universities accepting students, no careers for women, no tolerance for different perspectives. The clock was turning backward to the 1,990 seconds. Dawood's specific circumstances for leaving aren't documented publicly. But the general patterns are well established: families with resources or connections, young people with education, those with Western associations. These groups were identifying exit strategies. The journey from Afghanistan to Western Europe typically involves criminal networks specializing in human smuggling. Not because migrants are criminals, but because legal immigration routes don't exist for people in desperate situations. Dawood's journey takes him through countries that don't want him present. Iran hosts millions of Afghan refugees, but doesn't offer permanent solutions. Turkey is transit, not destination. The Balkans are dangerous. He needs to reach Europe. The lorry concealed in commercial cargo, hidden with dozens of other people, is the final barrier. The English Channel crossing that becomes permanent entry to Western refuge. It's dangerous. People suffocate in sealed containers. People freeze. People don't survive the journey. But the alternative, remaining in Afghanistan or trapped in limbo between countries, feels worse. Dawood survives the journey. He reaches Britain, he contacts authorities, he files for asylum. Rewind 5 years, 2020. France-UK border. Imagine being 17 years old, fleeing Afghanistan, with nothing but the clothes you're wearing and trauma you can't articulate. You've spent weeks traveling across Europe. Paid smugglers who treated you like cargo. Slept in camps where violence was routine and help was scarce. Then someone offers you a space in a lorry heading to Britain. The fee takes everything you have left. The journey takes 14 hours in darkness, barely breathing, praying the driver doesn't get searched. The lorry stops. Doors open. You're in Britain. Specifically, you're in Dover. And you have exactly zero plan for what happens next. This is how Safi Dawood entered the UK. Not through an airport with documents and interviews, through the back of a commercial vehicle, hoping border enforcement wouldn't notice the extra weight. They did notice. Eventually. By the time he was processed, Dawood was already classified as an unaccompanied minor seeking asylum. The system that handles these cases is overwhelmed, underfunded, and struggling to process thousands of similar arrivals. Dawood gets placed in temporary accommodation, gets assigned a case worker, begins the asylum process that will take 2 years to complete. During this time, he's technically in legal limbo. Not a citizen, not a refugee yet, just a case number waiting for bureaucracy to decide his fate. The Home Office reviews his application, checks his story against intelligence databases, conducts interviews about why he fled Afghanistan and why he can't return. The process is supposed to identify security risks while protecting genuine refugees. In 2022, Dawood's asylum claim is approved. He's granted refugee status. The government has determined that returning him to Afghanistan would put his life at risk. He's now legally allowed to remain in Britain, access services, and eventually apply for permanent residence. But legal status doesn't erase trauma. It doesn't automatically integrate someone into a foreign culture. It doesn't teach you how to navigate systems designed for people who grew up understanding them. Dawood is given housing support, access to language classes, referrals to mental health services that have months-long waiting lists. On paper, the support structure exists. In practice, thousands of refugees compete for limited resources while trying to rebuild lives in a country that speaks a different language and operates by unfamiliar rules. For 3 years, Dawood exists in this space, not thriving, not collapsing, just existing, working occasional jobs, learning English, trying to build something resembling a normal life. Then October 27, 2025 happens, and everything that came before becomes context for something nobody saw coming. Wayne Broadhurst was 49 years old when he encountered Safi Dawood on Midhurst Gardens. He lived in Uxbridge, worked as a tradesman, had family in the area, the kind of ordinary life that doesn't make headlines until something extraordinary happens. October 27th started like any Monday. Morning routine, work obligations, evening plans. Nothing suggested this day would be different from thousands before it. Around 5 p.m., Broadhurst was near Midhurst Gardens. The Metropolitan Police later confirmed he had no prior connection to Dawood. They weren't neighbors, weren't colleagues, hadn't met before. Their lives intersected randomly, the way stranger violence always does. What happened next gets reconstructed from witness statements, forensic evidence, and CCTV footage that captured fragments of the encounter. The full sequence takes approximately 90 seconds. Broadhurst sees something happening. Maybe hears shouting. Maybe notices someone in distress. His instinct, the kind that gets called heroic afterward, is to intervene, to help, to de-escalate whatever situation is unfolding. He approaches, says something. The words don't matter because they don't change what happens next. Dawood is armed. The weapon is a knife classified legally as an offensive weapon, which means carrying it in public is already a crime before it touches anyone. What happens in the following seconds transforms that possession charge into something infinitely worse. Broadhurst suffers multiple wounds. Emergency services arrive within minutes. Paramedics work on him at the scene, performing procedures designed to stabilize trauma patients. But some injuries are too severe. Some damage can't be reversed regardless of how quickly help arrives. Wayne Broadhurst is pronounced deceased at the scene. The official language is clinical because it has to be. Treated for stab wounds and lost at the scene, and life-threatening injuries sustained. Words that create professional distance from the reality that someone's father, brother, friend, neighbor bled out on a residential street while people watched. This is the part that haunts first responders. Not the injuries themselves, they're trained for that, but the ordinariness of it. A Monday evening in Uxbridge, someone trying to help. Someone whose intervention cost them everything. But Wayne Broadhurst wasn't the only person attacked that evening. 2 other victims survive, though survive is a complicated word when we're discussing the aftermath of violent trauma. The first is a 45-year-old man. Metropolitan Police confirm he knew Dawood before the incident. The nature of that connection, whether they were friends, acquaintances, or something else, remains undisclosed during initial reporting. Privacy laws protect victim identities unless they choose to come forward. This victim suffers what police classify as life-changing injuries. That's specific terminology. Not life-threatening, he'll survive. Not minor, they're permanent. Life-changing means exactly what it sounds like. Your existence before and after this moment are fundamentally different things. Maybe he loses function in a limb. Maybe the psychological damage makes normal life impossible. Maybe both. The phrase encompasses any injury that permanently alters how you navigate the world. He's transported to hospital, undergoes surgery, begins a recovery process that will take months or years. His life now divides into before October 27th and after October 27th. Everything is measured against that line. The second survivor is 14 years old. 14. Still in secondary school. Still technically a child by every legal and developmental metric, and now he's a victim in a case involving multiple attempted homicides. Police say his injuries are neither life-threatening nor life-changing. That's the best possible outcome in a worst possible situation. He'll physically recover. The psychological recovery is a different calculation. The Metropolitan Police confirm he also knew Dawood before the attack. 2 of the 3 victims had prior connections to the attacker. Only Wayne Broadhurst was a stranger intervening in something he encountered randomly. This detail matters. It suggests the attack wasn't completely indiscriminate. Dawood targeted specific people. Broadhurst became collateral damage when he tried to help. But knowing this doesn't explain why. Why attack people you know? Why use lethal violence? Why on a residential street at 5 p.m. when witnesses and cameras are everywhere? The answers to these questions will emerge during investigation and trial. But in the immediate aftermath, they're mysteries that make the incident feel even more senseless. Emergency services arrive at Midhurst Gardens at 5:07 p.m., 4 minutes after the initial call. In urban areas, that's remarkably fast response time. First responders find a scene that requires immediate triage. Multiple victims, active bleeding, witnesses in shock. Potential for additional threats at this point. They don't know if the attacker is still armed, still dangerous, still present. Paramedics work on Broadhurst while police secure the perimeter. The 4-year-old gets treated for his injuries. The 5-year-old is stabilized and prepared for transport. Everything follows protocols designed for mass casualty incidents. Safi Dawood is still at the scene. He hasn't fled, hasn't hidden the weapon. He's just standing there, in a way that multiple witnesses describe as disconnected or not really present. When police approach, he doesn't resist, no struggle, no attempted escape. He complies with instructions, allows himself to be restrained, and gets transported into custody without incident. But during transport, something happens. Dawood suffers what police describe as a medical episode. The specifics aren't disclosed. Privacy laws protect medical information, even for people in custody. But it's serious enough that he gets diverted to hospital instead of directly to a police station. He receives treatment, gets stabilized, then returns to custody, where he'll remain, while investigators build their case. The Metropolitan Police release a statement confirming one person has been arrested in connection with the incident. They don't name him yet. Protocol requires waiting until formal charges are filed. They appeal for witnesses. Request CCTV footage from nearby properties. Ask people not to speculate on social media. That last request is optimistic. By 6 p.m., speculation is already spreading across Twitter, Facebook, and local community forums. People share theories, make assumptions, turn tragedy into content. The police statement emphasizes, "We ask the public not to share anything that could impede future court proceedings." It's a reminder that social media posts can compromise trials. Witnesses can be influenced. Evidence can be tainted. Justice requires careful handling, not viral outrage. But the internet doesn't work that way. Information accurate and otherwise spreads faster than investigators can control. Within 24 hours, details about Dawood's asylum status leak online. His Afghan nationality becomes focal point for arguments about immigration policy, refugee vetting, and border security. These arguments happen while Wayne Broadhurst's family is still processing their loss, while the 5-year-old is in surgery, while the 4-year-old is trying to explain to his parents what happened. The case becomes political before it's even fully investigated. October 30th, 2025, 3 days after the attack, The Crown Prosecution Service announces charges against Safi Dawood. 1 count of murder, Wayne Broadhurst. 2 counts of attempted murder, the 4-5-year-old and 1 4-year-old. 1 count of possession of an offensive weapon, Jaswant Narwal, Chief Crown Prosecutor for CPS London North, releases a statement calling the incident shocking and confirming prosecutors have determined there's sufficient evidence to pursue criminal proceedings and that doing so serves the public interest. That last phrase, public interest, does specific legal work. The CPS doesn't prosecute every provable crime. They evaluate whether prosecution serves justice, public safety, and efficient use of court resources. This case clearly meets those thresholds. Murder charges in Britain carry mandatory life sentences. The question during trial isn't guilt or innocence, the evidence is overwhelming. The question is sentencing. How many years before parole eligibility? What mitigating factors exist? What aggravating factors increase culpability? Attempted murder charges carry maximum life sentences, but allow judicial discretion. The severity of injuries, intent evidence, and circumstances all influence sentencing. Possession of an offensive weapon is almost incidental given the other charges. It carries maximum 4 years imprisonment. But when someone's already facing life for murder, an additional weapons charge barely registers. Dawood is scheduled to appear at Westminster Magistrates' Court. Magistrates will conduct preliminary hearing, confirm identity, review charges, and determine which court will handle the trial. Cases involving murder automatically transfer to Crown Court, where more serious cases are heard by judge and jury. The legal process is beginning. It will take months, maybe years. The trial will require witness testimony, forensic evidence presentation, psychiatric evaluation, and legal arguments about culpability and intent. Wayne Broadhurst's family will attend. They'll hear details about how their loved one spent his final moments. They'll listen to defense arguments explaining why Dawood shouldn't receive maximum sentencing. They'll watch the person responsible sit in a courtroom while lawyers debate his fate. The 4 5-year-old and 1 4-year-old victims will potentially testify. They'll recount the attack, answer questions about their relationship with Dawood, provide victim impact statements describing how October 27th changed their lives. And Dawood will sit in the dock, listening to all this, while a jury decides what happens next. Here's what complicates every conversation about this case: Safi Dawood's immigration status. He entered Britain illegally in 2020. By the time authorities processed him, he was classified as an unaccompanied minor seeking asylum, a classification that triggers different legal procedures. Dawood applied for refugee status. The Home Office reviewed his case, conducted security screening, and checked him against terrorism databases. In 2022, they granted asylum, determining that returning him to Afghanistan would pose genuine danger to his life. This decision follows the 1951 Refugee Convention, which Britain signed. Nothing in Dawood's history suggested he posed danger. No criminal record, no extremist connections, no red flags. For 3 years after receiving status, he lived in Britain without incident. Then October 27th happened. This timeline creates difficult questions that fuel political debate. Some argue asylum systems are too lenient. Others counter that one case doesn't invalidate humanitarian obligations. Millions of refugees live peacefully in host countries. The reality: asylum systems balance humanitarian duties against security concerns. No screening process is perfect. Risk can't be reduced to zero without refusing all asylum seekers, which violates international law. Dawood passed screening, lived peacefully for 3 years, then committed a violent offense. We can debate whether better systems or mental health support would have prevented October 27th. But ultimately, individuals make choices. Systems create contexts. Both matter. Neither fully explains the tragedy that occurred on a Uxbridge street. Safi Dawood sits in custody awaiting trial. His next court appearance is scheduled. His legal team is preparing defense strategies. Prosecutors are building their case. This process takes months minimum, possibly over a year. During that time, Dawood exists in legal limbo, accused but not convicted, imprisoned but presumed innocent under law. Wayne Broadhurst's family continues grieving while waiting for something resembling justice. The trial won't bring him back. No sentence returns what they lost. But maybe it provides some form of closure. The 5-year-old undergoes rehabilitation, physical therapy, possibly psychological counseling, learning to live with injuries classified as life-changing. The 4-year-old returns to school, tries to resume normal adolescence, carries memories that won't fade regardless of how much time passes. And Uxbridge residents walk past Midhurst Gardens remembering what happened there. The flowers from the vigil eventually decompose. The candles burn out. Life continues, because it has to. But something changed. The sense that random violence can happen anywhere, even on quiet residential streets on Monday evenings. The knowledge that intervention trying to help can cost you your life. These aren't new truths, but October 27th made them feel immediate in a way statistics don't.